blessing of being able to gather to hear people's thoughts and words and know them by their actions and their deeds. We thank you for the privilege of being in this country, of having our freedoms, and we bless all those that sacrificed so that we may have them. We ask you to guide us, to help us learn the truth, to be creative, and to be truthful in all of our actions and deeds. We ask it in Jesus' name, and we thank you for every breath and every blessing you give us. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, Mrs. Goetzman couldn't make it, but she did send a letter and asked that we would read it. I want to thank you for the opportunity to answer questions your audience may have. However, due to a prior commitment, I must decline at this time. I am coordinating and, of course, attending a banquet honoring our Mount Vernon High School senior football players and cheerleaders on this evening. As an active, objective member of the Mount Vernon City Council, or Mount Vernon City School Board, I consider it a privilege to have the opportunity to run as an incumbent. I view public education as a way to give everyone, regardless of race, learning abilities, or disabilities, an opportunity to receive a quality, well-rounded education that prepares them for the next step in life. As a parent of 4 active, current Mount Vernon City School students, I understand what the needs of the current learner looks like. I would consider it an honor and a privilege to be elected to continue to serve the students, staff, faculty, and community of Mount Vernon. Thank you once again for your efforts in making this a successful night for the community of Mount Vernon. Sincerely, Jody Goetzman.
Okay. My name is Warren Edstrom. I'll be moderating tonight. The rules are each candidate will have a couple minutes to introduce themselves and say why they're running. If you have a question, there's 3x5 cards all over the place here. If you have questions, just put your name on the card. I don't want the question on the card, just the name. And just hold it up. Somebody will grab it and bring it up to me, and I'll call your name, and you can ask the question. In the interest of expediency tonight, if you have a question, I'd like you to direct the question at one of the candidates and not everybody, unless you feel like it's really important that you ask everybody, because we want to get everybody in. And if we do run out of questions and you wanted to ask questions of other candidates other than that one, we'll come back to it if we have the time. Okay? Okay. Starting out, we'll start here, and could you please give us a short bio and why you're running, please?
Good evening. My name is Steve Kelly, and I work for the Salvation Army. What I do for that organization is I balance budgets, I do internal auditing, make sure that organization keeps the public's trust, eliminate fraud and waste and abuse, and it's my job to make sure that that organization can accomplish its mission in the community in the most cost-efficient manner. The reason that I'm running for school board is because I believe that our current school board, while it has people who love our kids and have great educational experience, many of which have high-level degrees in that area, I think we need to have a balance between educators and people with management experience. And because of the fact that our school board has been very heavily weighted towards educators, and we have not had the experience of people who are able to do management issues such as budgeting and personnel and long-term planning and property and those sorts of areas, that we've gotten into some trouble in some areas. I'd like to apply the skills that I've learned in 20 years with the world's largest charity to the Mount Vernon City Schools, so that we can avoid some of the problems that we've gotten into in the last couple of years. We need a management voice on the school board, and I hope that you'll support me in my run. Thank you.
Last 20 years.
My name is Jeff Cline, local business owner here in the town. And I always put the claim out that I'm a Christian. I believe that we need some morals and values back in our school systems, what we today call public schools, which I believe from the depths of my heart and my soul, they're not public schools anymore. They're government schools. We've got things going on in our schools today. You read about them, you hear about them all the time on the news. And as a coach in this community, I've coached kids for 25 years in this community. I've done 18 years of Little League Baseball. I've done, I think it was 4 or 5 years of high school baseball, 4 years of middle school football, 7th and 8th grade. I know the kids. I know the kids' wants, the needs, and what these kids need. What they need in the community today, in all communities across America, is leadership. They need some morals and values. What they need is some men to step up and say, we'll be the character builders of the kids in the community. As I sit back in the last election, I thought about running for school board. And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to do it. We come up to another election, and I thought, somebody's got to do it. Sooner or later, we got to step up. I think we need business owners. We need a wide gamut of people, whether you're Christian, whether you're a business owner, whatever you are, rather than always putting school teachers in the school board spots, put a mixture of people in there. I agree with some of the things he said as far as decisions being made. Give us a little variety in there. Don't just always put the school teachers back in there. I mean, there are things going on in America today in schools I think need to be changed. As a Christian, as I go places, my Bible's always in my car. It's always in my workplace. It's here tonight with me. One of the books I've picked up today is David Barton's Original Intent. It's a good book I think all Americans ought to read. The courts, the Constitution, and religion. Our founding fathers, the Bible was one of the first books. The main 2 books in the schools was the Bible and the hymnal. I forget the first name of the hymnal that David Barton talks about. That was our foundation of our schools. Now, you can't mention God in the schools without a lawsuit coming, without somebody being fired. I say that because I was also let go at East Knox schools. For a couple kids that started going to church, and through prayer and different things, inviting them to church, was let go because, you can't do that in our schools today, separation of church and state, which is one of the biggest lies in America. It's been flipped around. The understanding is taken away out of context. So as a business owner and a Christian, I'm going to run for the school board spot this year to try and make a difference for our youth in our community. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Margie Bennett, and I moved to Mount Vernon in 1976, and I became involved with the Mount Vernon schools when my children started school in the mid-1980s, and I was encouraged by a group of parents to consider running for school board because they were concerned about quality of academics. I did that, was elected in 1988, and I've served 6 consecutive terms. I'm married to Fortis Bennett. I have 2 daughters that graduated from Mount Vernon High School, and I have 4 wonderful grandchildren. And I'm passionate about education. I believe that education has the power to change lives. I don't believe it's corny. The American dream really is true, and children need a good, solid foundation in which to meet the challenges of our world today. I believe that I have the knowledge, the experience, the commitment, and the integrity to continue to be a good school board member, an excellent school board member. And I feel like my leadership abilities have been affirmed recently by the Knox County Chamber of Commerce when they awarded me with the Women in Business Leadership Award in January 2010. And spring of 2011, the Ohio School Board Association presented me with the 2011 Award of Achievement. I also have the high honor of serving on the Institutional Actions Council of the Higher Learning Commission of the North Central Association of Colleges and Schools. And this is the accreditation body for all colleges and universities in a 19-state region. And through my work in the Higher Learning Commission, we go in and evaluate all aspects of an institution, the personnel, the finances, curriculum, everything. And that's been wonderful training. I've also been very concerned about our finances, and I'm happy to report that this year we will spend, it's estimated we will spend $1 million less than we spent in 2007-8. That's 5 years ago. And if you just consider 3% cost of living modest increases, that means we should have spent $5 million more instead of $1 million less. So I think that speaks well of the school board in containing costs and expenses. I am very proud of our school district. In spite of all these financial challenges, we have had a number of significant accomplishments this past year. We've had 4 schools named excellent, and 1 was excellent with distinction, our high school and 3 elementaries. We have our elementary schools were recognized by the Ohio Department of Education for their community involvement. Our middle school received a national award for efficiency in heating and cooling, and our high school hosted a number of state events at which we had a multitude of visitors visit our high school. We have so many scholar athletes and wonderful extracurricular events that our students have excelled in, and I'm just very proud of our teachers, our administrators, and our staff. I hold high expectations for myself, for the school board, and for each of our administrators and teachers and staff, and they're all working very hard to make sure that our children succeed. I would consider it an honor and a privilege to receive your vote.
Hi, my name is Marie Curry. And I am running for school board because I think it's important. I'm doing it for the children. I'm married, mother of 5 children, ages 10 to 26 now. I had a birthday yesterday for one of them. Having children in the Mount Vernon School District for the past 20 years, I've had the opportunity to see many aspects of our district. My children have been involved in sports, as well as many academic and extracurricular activities. I've coached several sports teams throughout those years. I've been a room mother, a volunteer in the classroom, a PTO officer, served on the academic advisory board, Head Start board, and have been a substitute secretary and aide with the schools starting since 1997. I feel our district needs to establish accountability at all levels. I think all of our children are important and need to be given the best opportunity for learning. And I feel that my experience with my children in the community and within the school districts, I hope to offer my experience to the board and help improve it. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions on the card? If you do, put your hand up and we'll get it. First question from, it looks like Hayne Link. Wayne, excuse me. If you could ask your question, please.
I'd like to direct a question to Jeff Cline. While it's important for us to have Christian values, do you think it's important for teachers to express those values during the course of teaching in a school while they put the school board and the school district at financial risk because of a lawsuit?
Well, as it stands today, with the separation of church and state, the law is you can't preach religion from the classroom. As we stand there today with that law, as bogus as I think the church and state is, we have to agree with it for now. But I think as people in our communities, we need to start challenging that. I'm not saying we have to preach in the classroom, but I'm saying if a kid comes to me in the gymnasium, life's a mess, and I'm in the gymnasium as a high school baseball coach, and the kid says, "Coach, help me." As a Christian, what do I do? At that point, I have a couple of incidents that happened at East Knox. Very great honoring situations for me as a Christian. As I took my hat, I asked the kid, I said, "Do you believe in God?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Do you pray?" He said, "Sometimes." I said, "Do you go to church?" He said, "Sometimes, not very often." I said, "Well, let me tell you something." He's given me the situation of his mom lives in the Carolinas, drug addict, alcoholic. Dad is at home, he's living with him, full-blown drunk. The boy's always late, he's always angry, he's always irritated. I've seen this for months. So I offered this to the kid. Separation of church stays at this point with me is out the window. I said, "Young man, I'll tell you what I'll do." I said, "I will pray for your mom." I believe that also as somebody in the past with alcohol and drug problems, 15 years clean, God can deliver you from that. He said, "You really think so, Coach?" I said, "Yes, I do, young man." I said, so I would pray for your mom. And then I'll pray for her later. He looked at me and he says, right now? So what do I do at this point? As a Christian, as a leader, a mentor, and a coach, I said, yes, take your hat off. I did it at that point at a drinking fountain at Jim Dane's. He never disrupted practice, but was called on the carpet a month later. But a month later, this kid comes in to me one day smiling. First time I seen a smile on his face. It was probably 2, 3, 4 weeks later. I don't know, roughly time frame. I said, Doug, what's up today? He said, Coach, he said, you ain't gonna believe this. My mom called me. Now that night he was a half hour day practice. It was 2 hours of punching holes in the wall and cussing. This is a young man, irritated at life. He comes into me and he says, Coach, my mom's gonna quit drinking and doing drugs, and I'm gonna move in with her. I said, thank you, Jesus. He said, you're right, it worked. So at this point, what do? You know what I mean? I either honor man's law or honor God's law. At that point, I chose to do the right thing, and it was the right thing for that young man. So that's where I stand on issues like that. Not saying we have to stand up and preach out of the Bible in the classrooms. I've been asked that a couple times. But as a Christian, if you've got certain moral values and certain convictions, stand for them. That's the way I see it.
Sir, you have a Constitution there. Could you read the Constitution?
All of it?
No. just the part pertaining to religion, exercise of religion. There's two parts in this constitutional clause. There's two parts. One is the free exercise clause, and one is the establishment clause. The first clause says, the first part of it says that
Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion,
right, and the second part.
or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
Now, we've heard a whole lot about establishment, but we haven't heard hardly anything about exercise of. And you could say that there's a contradiction here. Because on the one hand, it says the government can't establish a religion, and in the intent of the framers, that was the government can't start a government-mandated religious denomination like they had in England. The second one says that you can't interfere with the exercise of religion. Most of the things that I've seen in the last 25 years, 30 years, have been interference with the exercise of religion. But nobody brings that up because we don't want to promote religion, we want to suppress it. So the powers that be. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Huh?
Thank you for bringing it up.
George Oliver.
Simple yes or no to each one of the candidates. Do you support issue 2, that being the keeping of Senate Bill 5 as it deals with union activity? Simple yes or no?
Didn't we start that? Yes.
Support. You're saying yes or no on your vote?
You say yes, you say the bill remains intact. All the changes that the current administration made.
Yes, SB 5, I agree with.
I would say yes.
You say what? What did she say?
I would say yes. I support professionalism of our teachers.
I support the unions. I support the unions. That's a no.
That's a no.
Mr. Bennett, you support teachers, that would be no.
Mine's a no. I support the unions.
Mine's a no. I'm a union member like that.
I'm confused.
Okay, Dwayne Levy.
Question for Mrs. Bennett, since she is preoccupied there. Okay. For Mrs. Bennett, since she has the longest tenure, a little background. This past week, an exec from Columbus area came into Mount Vernon to look at a high-end house. His biggest concern, financial outlook for the Mount Vernon school. Now, this information came from the owner of the house, so I know it's true. Just looking at the 5-year forecast as of the October 24th, at the top of my head. The projected June 30 fund balance beginning fiscal 13 is about $900,000 deficit and escalates through this year 16 at 9.5 million. Now, these numbers assume the passage of the renewal levy. They do not?
That's at the bottom, very bottom of the 5-year forecast. We are not allowed to assume that because we
Well,
haven't passed it yet.
Okay, I stand corrected. I thought that that was in there because at the bottom, you have new levies total $9 million for that period.
The 5-year forecast, I have it with me.
Well, I don't want to take a lot of time on
You can't assume that it's passed, so you
Yeah, I
have
know
to
that.
report what it would be if it hasn't passed. And then I think there's another line below that that shows if the renewals pass, then what it would be.
Okay,
I think it's negative 1.4 million at the end of 2013, is that correct? If you have it, I have it.
2014, it's at 3.5 negative. In any event, obviously there'll be new levies required to meet the financial requirements to run the school district. No question about that, okay? It also assumes, as near as I can tell, salary and benefits escalating at 1.25% per year for a 5-year period. Rough figures, but approximately. Sounds a little low compared to history, so I just wonder about that. The bottom line, the real question is, how would you address the financial outlook other than just more levies as we go through the next 2, 3, and 4 years?
Is that addressed to everyone?
No, that was addressed to you.
Oh, to me. Well, first of all, the state has cut the school district by 10% this year. We are currently on a bridge formula because they haven't decided what they're going to do next year. So we're operating on a bridge, which is supposed to hold us even with our 2011 fiscal year budget. So we don't even really know what the future holds, and it's very difficult for our treasurer to make a 5-year forecast. She did predict a low percentage increase because this year our teachers took a freeze, and that is on steps, and that is on any increases, and they also are paying more on the insurance by 5%. So they made a tremendous sacrifice this year. And next year, we're hoping that we can honor increases, but we really don't know because we don't know yet what the state's going to do. So the federal government as well has cut stimulus money, which we had last year. We did qualify for Race to the Top. We worked very hard to achieve that grant, and that's helping teachers and intervention specialists with math training, 4 days of training, so they can better meet our students' needs. I guess it's very difficult to say. I don't have a magic wand, but we have 80%, more than 80% of our budget is personnel. So we don't have anything left to cut except programs, personnel, and buildings. And that's why it's very important we pass the current levy, which is renewal. And we have looked, the Financial Advisory Council has looked at a number of options. They're suggesting that maybe we look at sales tax, income tax combination with property tax, a variety of things. We need to hear from the community. What do you think would be realistic for the school district to pass? We haven't asked for new money because we felt the community sentiment was that we shouldn't ask for new money. So we have simply reduced the budget so that we could go another year out on what we currently have. So if we don't pass the renewal, or if we do pass the renewal, there will still be continued cuts. Just because we don't, unless the state comes through and returns us at the level they have in the past.
Kind of a follow-up question. I was able to sit on many board meetings during the past year. I really don't recall any serious conversations in the board setting anyway about how to deal with cost structure. Might I suggest that you consider, the new board, whomever is on it, opening up some board meetings for local participation on cost of operations and new ideas.
Well, and the Financial Advisory Council is open. If you want to sit in on that, you're welcome to come and hear what's discussed. A lot of different things discussed. But thank you for that. And thank you for coming to our board meetings.
Margie, has there ever been a performance audit in the Mount Vernon school system?
Yes, there has been.
How long ago was that?
Quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
That we have.
Would you
We have
support
done that. We have a public audit done every year, actually, and we have clean management letters. There have been no findings, any problems. So we're very proud of our clean audit.
Would you support a renewed audit, you know,
A renewed audit would be.
you said that there was a performance audit done a long time ago?
Well, we have, our books are audited every single year. We have a financial audit.
It's my understanding, though, that a performance audit comes in and looks at different ways you can do things to save money and that kind of stuff, not just auditing the books. Is that correct?
We have a treasurer, we have a superintendent and principals. We've asked all of our staff and teachers to make recommendations, and we've had a lot of good ideas that we've been able to implement. Our teachers and staff know what's going to be least detrimental to our students, and that's what we're concerned about. We're concerned about learning in the classroom, and that's what we don't want to cut with kids in the classroom. So they're the ones that are working at our schools and know what will be least detrimental to cut for students.
Dave Metcalf.
I've got a question about, we know that to bring industry into Mount Vernon, the three things that industries look at, one of them is parks, one of them is the city, one of them is financial, and one of them is the school system. After we've been all over the front page of every newspaper in the state of Ohio in the John Freshwater case, I want a 1-minute answer from everybody of what we're going to do about it to change this.
Well, I'll jump in since I'm at the end of the table. I believe that the first thing that we need to do is we need to get back the credibility that we have lost. And I'm not just talking about the freshwater issue. Ever since I moved to Mount Vernon, I see year after year levies on the ballot that don't pass. And that to me says that we have a credibility problem, that the people of Mount Vernon do not want to entrust the school board with additional funds. Now, whether the renewal will pass or not, we'll see in a couple of weeks. But there is an underlying credibility issue, which is why I believe that we need to bring management professionals to the table so that we can regain the trust of the people in this community and the state as a whole. And that controversy was not just statewide, that hit national news. So national companies looking at where they can go, they are going to be, that's going to be right there on their radar screen. We need a top-to-bottom review of our personnel policies so that we don't get into these kind of messes again. We need a top-to-bottom fiscal review. We need better planning for long term so that we're not opening expensive school buildings and then talking about closing them 5 years later. Those kinds of things trash our credibility. And we're not going to be able to attract industry, as you say, until we get our reputation back.
Then we need a new superintendent.
Well, that's one of my reasons for running for school board. When all that first flared up, I had said to my pastor, somebody's got to run. And I did that year. So I've been now, since the last election, pondering that. Why didn't I do that? That's why I stepped up this year. I almost didn't do it this year. And I thought, you know what? Somebody's got to step up. When all these decisions are made, like Mrs. Bennett just said, the decisions always come back to a school teacher, a guidance counselor, a principal, a superintendent. They're insiders. I believe, and I'm going to stand here tonight and I'm going to say it, John Freshwater was wrong. I'm at the heartbeat of the community. I talk to people every day. Hundreds of people, probably thousands. I talk to them all the time. I go to auctions across the state of Ohio and even in Pennsylvania. As I'm out in the communities, I hear it. Whether I'm in Zanesville, whether I'm in Perryopolis, Pennsylvania, whether I'm in Akron, Ohio, wherever I'm at, the outrage everywhere, they always ask me. I got a shirt I wear that says, God needed in public schools. And on the back it says, has a girl saying a little quote, God, why all the violence and the corruption in our schools? Answer from God is, because you won't let me in there. I wear that shirt everywhere, and I have nothing but pats on the back everywhere I go. And everybody tells me, whether it's this community or across the state or other states, what they did to that man was wrong. That's why I'm running this time, because we have another situation like that. We'll make sure it's not wrong. And the disgrace that comes, because that was across the AP News Network. Everywhere you go, there's a small handful of people in this community that agree he should have went. There is a small group of people in the school, I think if truth be known, a small group would say, you know what, he should have went. I believe in my heart it was a witch hunt. You don't line up thousands of kids in this community. I just had 2 more high school kids on my car lot day before yesterday. I always ask the kids in this community, what do you think about, and they'll bring it up to me if I don't ask. So my question is, what do you think? Tell me what you think, young man, a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old. Oh, I think it was terrible what they done to him. Kids in the community can use a little more common sense than what some adults have made on that situation. We blew $1 million on firing John Freshwater. The attorney was brought, Millstone, I've got the information. Anybody wants to see me afterwards tonight, I got it on my computer where he came from. He was a top dog attorney in the United States of America for the Obama administration. Back when all that stimulus money came out, he was the attorney that won the case for President Barack Hussein Obama. I've got it. I've been reading it. It's incredible when you see. I asked the question, how did Millstone land here in Mount Vernon to destroy John Freshwater? It wasn't a coincidence. So I will stand on anything like that that comes up again. I will stand, and I will stand with a spine, and it won't happen again.
I would just remind everyone that the Mount Vernon City School Board was sued. We didn't seek the lawsuit. We simply defended the school district, and it's been upheld in each court in which it's been presented. It amounts to $300,000 per year for 3 years, which was 1% of our budget for legal expenses, which is probably not exorbitant if you think of a business. We're the 5th largest employer in Mount Vernon. Am I happy that we had to spend money that way? Absolutely not. But the school board had no choice. It was obligated to defend itself. And we have attempted to put additional personnel policies in place so that more evaluation and accountability will take place at a sooner level, so that hopefully teachers will know the boundaries and respect them. And I guess that's all I can really say at this point. But I think that the school district has done the best that it could under the circumstances. I'm sick about the fact that it has divided our community. It's been a very divisive issue. And we forget that it's all about the kids and it's about education, and that's what we really should be focused on instead of arguing about this. So I hope that we can get back to put this behind us and build community relationships and remember that our kids are what are important in their education, and we can all work together to strive for better schools.
For me, I think, and this is what I've said several times, we need to establish accountability throughout our district at all levels. I think we need to establish documentation, follow-up. We need to make sure that procedures are being followed, and we need to be held accountable for our actions. I know in my job, I'm responsible for my actions, and I hope that everyone that we put our children's lives in would expect the same. They should be accountable for their actions, and we should follow the policies and procedures.
Okay, Diane Holly.
Hi, I guess Margie Bennett is the only one I can ask this question of, since she's sitting on the board. In this flyer about the renewal, it says something about national award for going green, which saves money. That's pretty vague. Would you explain what
Yeah.
we did?
At the middle school level, there was something that the state had available to school districts. It was called House Bill 264. And for energy efficiency, the school district had a bond and borrowed that money from the state. We were told that we could pay it off in 10 or 12 years by the energy savings that we would accomplish. Instead, the very first year, we saved $250,000 because it was so significant. It was for lighting and cooling changes in the middle school, the high school, and Pleasant Street Elementary School. And we are on target to have completed, paid back that bond levy within less than 7 years. So we feel like it's a real cost-saving measure for the school district. Also, for those who say we haven't managed the schools well, we saved enough money to pay for Twin Oak Elementary School outright, and did no borrowing for that, did not come to the community and ask for money for that. So I think that shows that the schools have been well managed. What's happened to our school district is not unusual. Throughout the state, we have 611 schools in the state of Ohio, and we have half of them on the ballot for renewals or levies coming up. And the reason it seems that we're on the ballot so often is because we have what are called emergency levies. And they are simply for a period of 5 years. So the current one that we have on the ballot was initially passed in 1984 for a certain dollar amount, $846,000. And at that time, it took more millage than we're asking for now, because as the valuation goes up, the millage goes down. So the dollar amount remains constant. And that's why the schools are struggling, because we have no cost of living index. We have no growth. The money that we receive on a levy is constant. When we have a renewal, it's not a 3% increase. It's the exact same amount that was passed in 1984. And I think people need to understand that. The schools have not had any new money from property tax since 1996. And if you think about your own family having to live on the same amount of money that you had in 1996 without any percentage increase, you can understand what a challenge that would be. And the fact that we have been able to manage as well as we have, I think, is commendable. And we worked hard to do that. And we're very proud of our school district.
Can I comment on, just to add to that? I will say one thing tonight, and the first night I spoke, that when they put the letters in the paper on each school board member, and I had recently talked to Steve Thompson to get a little info, because I'm going to tell you something, sitting not on a school board, you don't have privy to all the information. So I've asked some questions. Now, the first statement I made was in the newspaper is, I am against the renewal levy. I'm going to stand here tonight, and I'll agree with Dr. Bennett. I've talked to Steve Thompson, and we do need. He explained it to me. And up until this point, until the flyers came out the other day, I don't think the citizens in the community understood what the levy was about. My understanding was, when I started running for this position, was a couple years ago, the renewal got turned down. The next one was going to be a 7.2 mil levy. So I'd never heard anything at that point, so I wanted to clear the air tonight. When I said I'm against the levy, that's what my understanding was. As I understand it now, and seeing the flyers they threw out the other night, I'm for the renewal. Saying the property taxes don't go up. So I wanted to clarify that tonight, because I know Steve Short had said something that somebody had misspoke. He was talking about me, and I'll admit tonight, I misspoke on it. But I never got any information on it to know the true understanding. So as soon as Steve Thompson told me, he said, Jeff, if you get elected to the school board, and you're in here with me, so make our jobs tougher if we don't pass the renewal. So I will stand tonight, because I agree, we got to keep somewhat going into schools for the youth in the community. It's not just go out and tear down people that are affiliated with the schools. So I wanted to publicly say that tonight, that I am for the renewal levy. So if anybody wonders, that clear that.
May I comment too? When I hear the incumbents say, everything's going great, places are well managed, we're proud of the financial situation that we're in, and then we step into the voting booth and we see an emergency levy, it's incongruous. Now, I understand that there is a law that has to do with the wording of the levies, so that if it's called an emergency levy, then it does not affect your state funding in the same way that a regular levy would. I understand the intricacies of how they phrase those. But when year after year we keep hearing on the one hand the message, it's an emergency, and on the other hand we get the message, everything's going great, something's not right. It doesn't fit. We can't be in a constant state of emergency and things be going wonderful. One of them is not true.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
Emergency levy and a continuing levy are the only two options that we have. Continuing levy means if you vote it, we have it for perpetuity. It goes on forever. We have felt that our community supports levies that they have an option of reviewing every so many years. So we have gone the emergency levy route. It's simply terminology. Doesn't mean that we're an emergency state. It's what the state refers to as a levy that lasts for 5 years. So that's what emergency means. It's a 5-year and it has to be renewed every 5 years.
I want to say something. I want to ask a question. All you people, Mr. Kelly, all of you up there, I do think we need a new school board, not any incumbents back on there. I personally believe that. But I'm going to tell you, we're going to have to find another way to support these schools than levies. There's 65% of your people do not own property in this town. And the other 30% is paying the whole bill. It's not fair, it's not right, it should be an income tax thing to take care of these schools, where everybody pays their fair share. Us people that own our own homes, we're paying it all. And senior citizens, I'm a senior citizen. And it's not fair to us, we've been doing this for years, but the school board have never come up with an idea except get the people that own property. You're one of them.
That's not true.
Miss Bennett, you're one of them.
We did try.
And I think that we ought to take this whole school board out and put a new one in it, as far as I'm concerned. And Mr. Kelly, I think you do a good job on there. Mr. Cline, I think you would too, and I don't know the others, but I do know the way the people talk.
I happen to agree with you that property taxes, in principle, are a lousy way to fund the schools. But as a school board, we are going to have to work within the context of current Ohio law. And if those of us who have a problem with the way that the current Ohio law is structured, we need to contact our representatives and see if we can make a change at the state level. For the time being, the school board does have to work within the context of the legal structure we have. And so those options are more limited than we wish they were.
Until you get a new concept, you're never going to get a school levy passed. Because people sick and tired of what's been going on.
Many years ago, we did try to pass an income tax levy, and it did not pass. So we took that voice from the community that they were not supporting the income tax. So we'd like to hear from you. If you have other ideas, we are certainly open to exploring those.
I'm really sorry to butt in because I don't have my name up there, but I'm wondering if anybody on this panel is aware of the fact that to use a property tax levy in the state of Ohio to fund public schools has been voted unconstitutional by the Supreme Court 4 times. I wonder if anyone's aware.
I'm aware of that.
Then
Why it's
why
going to be overturned.
Is that what you're talking about?
4 times it has been ruled. So is that technically in your mind, does that mean it's illegal to put these on the ballot?
It means that
Congress to do
it's
something
voted
about it.
illegal that the state of Ohio is not adequately funding schools as well.
Well, they told the state legislature to fix it, and they refused to do
And
so.
they have not done so, right? And the Supreme Court has told them to fix them.
In the back?
So there's been a proposal made and it's been sent around to change how schools are funded and do it in a sales tax manner. And school districts do have the authority to change how it is funded to a sales tax, regardless of what the state says. Proof of that is Medina County's already done similar fashion things. So why don't you guys do that instead of tinker around with it, or is it that because you're trying to protect something else, like your job? Because if you go to a property, if you go to a sales tax, where you actually have to use the money that you actually get, not just continue to tax away. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to continue to do property tax when people have no money, people are having a difficult time from the economy losing their jobs, and now you want to come around with property tax and take their homes away from them. You don't give anybody any incentive to work through the difficult times like we're having now in these times to do anything about anything, because they have a forever permanent lien on their property by way of property tax, and they just go, well, the heck with this. And then you're out even more, because who's going to pay them? This way everybody pays.
Recently, our treasurer, we asked to find the level of taxation for the Mount Vernon City Schools in comparison with the county schools and all of our OCC schools that we compete against. Mount Vernon was the second lowest percentage of tax, and that's taking income divided into the total valuation.
Why do you look at what other people are doing? Why don't you look at what you're doing instead of what everybody else is doing and try and stay up with the Joneses? Who cares about what? Who cares? We're Mount Vernon. Who cares what Fredericktown does? That's their problem up there. They have their own problems up there. We have our problems here in Mount Vernon. They can take care of Fredericktown can take care of themselves.
I just think you need to realize that Mount Vernon City School District is a very low percentage of tax. You may personally feel like it's high, but it is a very low percentage of tax when you compare it with other school districts. Clear Fork
I
is
understand it,
1.60.
but that's not the question. The question is who cares? Nobody cares about what other school districts are doing here in this room. They care what you're doing here in Mount Vernon. That's the question. What are you going to do about it? It doesn't matter what anybody else is doing. What are you going to do? That's the question.
Well, currently, we aren't asking for any new money. It's simply a renewal of what we've been collecting since 1984. And I would welcome you to come to a school board meeting and present your ideas about sales tax, property tax. We've asked the community, what would
Well,
you...
how do you justify asking for more money when you spent close to $2 million on frivolous lawsuits?
$900,000. I mean, it's bad enough to...
Well, that's one lawsuit. There's another lawsuit that another situation that you guys spent money on too. That your total is about $2 million. Why do you need? When you're throwing money around like that, why do you want more?
I'm sorry, I think you missed it.
If I could more directly answer your question, sir, the property tax is unequally applied. You have many people in the community who are not paying that bill, and that means that those who are paying the bill are paying a bigger share than they really should be. Property tax is a lousy way to fund our schools.
So
I believe that it should be a consumption-based tax, but we have to work within political realities. If we can get a sales tax passed that would replace all the property tax income, if we could accomplish that, I would support it 100%.
What about an income tax?
I would support that as well. My first preference would be a consumption-based tax rather than an income-based tax, simply because you've got people who are retired and their income goes down, then it's not applying equally. I think a consumption-based tax is more fair across the tax base.
Well, in the state of Ohio, I can tell you, in the state of Ohio, 4.5% sales tax will take care of all the money that is currently being wasted in the school systems throughout the entire state of Ohio. And in reality, once you fix how the schools are actually operationally done, in reality, it will only take 2.5% sales tax to fund all the schools in the state of Ohio, including Mount Vernon City Schools.
If I can add to that, here's what I'll suggest. I think in America, I think we're in shambles now. You hear it from politicians now today talking about drastic changes we need to make. When I've been to some school board meetings, back when I started going, there was nobody sitting in these meetings. You walk into a school board meeting, there's hardly ever anybody there unless there's controversy brewing. Then it is. When I started, my suggestion is we need to get more people active. We have 50% of the people in the United States go vote in any election. That, in my mind, that's pathetic. We'll have a very low turnout of voters, on different events that come across elections. I seen one year where we had 2,700 people vote, 1,700 for, 1,000 against. There's more than 2,700 people in the city of Mount Vernon. But I think with times getting tough, people are getting pinched in the pocketbook. I firmly believe the more we keep dishonoring God in this country and kicking him to the curb, this is the results we get in our schools and our government. When we do not no longer bless God, this is what happens in America. God's pulled his hedges back from this country like he did in Israel in the Old Testament. But we aren't smart enough to figure it out that we're getting spanked. So until we step up in this country and start making some drastic changes, we're going to continue with this. And our kids are going to suffer in our school systems. So I would say start going to the school board meetings. I would love to have it. But I know from past experience being in school board meetings, I can get 3 minutes to speak. They look at me like I've got 3 heads. Time, you're done. You walk out, nothing's ever answered. That's been the past experience of mine with the school board. If I'm on a school board and you've got a question, if I'm sitting on the school board, stop into my car lot. I'm glad to answer it. I think truth needs to be exposed more than what it is, whether it's our government, that's a bunch of hypocrites, or that clear down to our school boards in our areas. But we need to start making some changes and people need to get involved. That's why I'm running this year. We all need to get involved and start making the changes we need for our next generation of kids coming up. It's pretty simple.
I'd just like to revisit for a minute a very interesting conversation we're having on changing the funding mechanism for schools. It's my understanding that across the nation and for perhaps a century, that property tax has been the tax of choice not only for schools, but also for funding police, and fire, and a lot of our municipal service because of its stability. And I guess I'd like to know, for those who have tonight voiced a preference for consumption taxes, income taxes, and sales taxes as opposed to property taxes, in the recent economy that we've just gone through, where those measures have fluctuated wildly, how can you think that schools can successfully employ that as its sole funding source, and at the same time profess a desire to have very precise, long-term budgetary planning for the schools? The two, in my mind, are totally incompatible. You have no idea what income levels and income revenues and sales tax, especially in the recent economy, are going to be, not only from year to year, but from quarter to quarter. How do you manage schools effectively when you do not control the factors of production as tightly as you can in industry? We've often heard that schools are a business, but they are a unique business. There's nothing quite like running schools, at least in my experience.
You are right to mention that there are some wild fluctuations in both income and consumption. But I would counter that by saying that we are also seeing some wild fluctuations in property values. The housing bubble has caused people's home values to plummet. Ohio has not suffered as badly as some other parts of the country like Nevada and California, but most people's houses are worth less than they paid for. And if our assessment process accurately reflected the market, we would see plummeting tax revenue coming in through the property tax stream. The fact is that our assessment system does not keep up with the fluctuations in the housing market very well, and so that's created more stability. I do still advocate for a consumption tax, and here's how. My organization has some large investments. They fluctuate wildly with the stock market. And because of that, we don't want that revenue stream to be all over the place. So what we do is we take a 20-quarter rolling average. It means that we take the returns that we receive over a 5-year period, and that's what we spend. So some years we're going to be adding more into the fund, some years we're going to be taking out of the fund, but we average it out over a 5-year period, and that's what we budget upon. And in most cases, that will get you through a recessionary cycle.
You think that would work for the schools? I mean, are you advocating that the schools build up vast operating reserves in back years so that they can enjoy that in lean years, or do they use it? Because in
I'm
my mind,
advocating, if we
convince
were to
somebody-
switch to a consumption-based tax, then that reserve system would be a necessary component.
But do you not think, though, that if taxpayers started to see those reservoirs of monies build up, that they would start to question the level at which they're being taxed and start to clamor for pulling it back? I think they would. I think it's
Well,
happening.
certainly those questions would be asked, and a wise school board would be able to answer those questions well. But the next recession that hits, when we start tapping those reserves without having to raise the taxes, that school board's going to look pretty good in those years.
So when the government, well, I'm going to add to this, when the government has a surplus in past history, did the government roll it back out, or did they hang on to that surplus for the rainy day coming for the next storm that's going to hit? I, as a property owner, I shell my taxes out every half. I've got 2 apartments beside me. So at this point, the 2 young couples that are living in my apartment building beside me haven't raised the rent in 5 years on these young people that live in these apartments. Got one woman that's a single mom with a child, just graduated from nursing school. She struggles to get by. The other family in the other half of the building is a newly married couple with 1 kid, and they're both struggling. I can't walk over and beat on their door and say, I'm up in your rent. Haven't done it in 5 years, and I won't do it. I'm trying to suffer through it, not making a whole lot of money as a business owner, but I think what we need to do in this country is get rid of the liberal, progressive stuff that goes on in this country and get back to the basic.
What are some of those things, Mr. Cline? What are the liberal, progressive stuff that go on in our schools?
I'm talking, I said in the country.
No, but
and it's
we're
in the
talking
schools
about
too.
schools.
It's in the school. You want me to address it?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Can you guys please address this offline?
No, I want to hear it now.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of the liberal, progressive stuff that goes on in our schools. I can tell you that, for example, like before the freshwater thing ever fired up, the first 3 or 4 months of school board meetings that I attended and spoke on was on the filthy books in the school. Before the thing ever fired up at John Freshwater, it was on the filthy books and the FCA in the middle school. The FCA in the Mount Vernon Middle School was pulling in every Tuesday on a lunch break 45 to 60 kids in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, for anybody that doesn't know what FCA is. So the controversy with the liberal agenda that started that year in that school was the second week of school, FCA was canceled. They never do FCA on the first week. And when I shared the story with people, then they started understanding what happened that year. Second week rolled around, great 9/11 message was to be spoken that day. And it was, matter of fact, controversial Coach Dave Dobbenmeyer, which the liberal progressive group hates. So as we walk into the school that day, who meets me at the front door is the FCA facilitator, John Freshwater. Coach and I walk in. He drove an hour drive to get here to speak. We've been doing this for years. 17 years as a facilitator. Probably 5 or 6 years I've spoken FCAs in East Knox and Mount Vernon. Get to fill in when I get a chance. We walk in the door, front doors of the middle school that day. John Freshwater meets us there. They've canceled the FCA. We're like, why? Walk in, we go into Steve Short in the Mr. White's office, first year principal for Mr. White. First year on the school. I didn't know who this guy was, but I got to meet him that morning. We walk in to sit down with Steve Short, Mr. White, John Freshwater, Coach Dave Dobbenmeyer, and myself. Steve Short told me, he said, we got one phone call this morning. Somebody outraged because Coach is speaking. He personally knew Coach. He's known him for 20, 30 years. As a Mount Vernon citizen, Nazarene church goer, Nazarene University graduate, he says, Coach, this wasn't about you. Coach said, yes, it was. He said, you took one phone call and canceled the whole FCA program because I was coming to speak. Steve Short says, well, you know what? Maybe I jumped the gun on it. And I'm sitting there like, jumped the gun? And you definitely jumped the gun on it. You canceled FCA. So I tend, the next 3 or 4 months, they start with the policy now, the school did, with their liberal agenda. You've got to have a names list standing at the door of FCA. Every kid that comes into your FCA, it's 6 to 8 minutes, mind you, 6 to 8 minutes long for FCA. You can either walk out the door for recess or come in the music room. So at this point, Mr. White says, you've got to take a names list and get permission slips. I said, by the time you collect the permission slips in 6 minutes, FCA's over. I said, your agenda is to ruin FCA, run it clear out of this Mount Vernon Middle School because you hate Christianity in the school.
Jeff, that's a parallel conversation.
It's a liberal.
You started, and the reason you...
It's a whole liberal agenda.
So you said, all right, explain to me and everybody else, what money did that cost the schools? You said the exorbitant cost the schools or expenses are tied to a liberal, and I don't see how that costs anybody a penny.
Let me finish. This is where the expense went. We're into the school season. Second week when it was canceled. So now we're into the first month, second month, third month of school board meetings that we were attending, just asking please. And we went in very cordial, very polite, and said, please, do not do this to the FCA. We were ignored. They were going to do this no matter what. The goal was when Mr. White, and this is my beliefs, Mr. White was in here to make sure we got that FCA run out of that school. Because for 3 or 4 months board meetings, it was just, I was ignored. And anybody else that spoke about it, we were just begging, please don't. And I had personally sit in Mr. White's office and asked him, please don't do this. Well, Jeff, we have to do it whether it's a vampire club meeting or whatever it is, we have to do it for all. I hear the same old gobbledygook you hear all the time. From the liberal side, you got to do it for one, you got to do it for all. It was a mission. So at this point, 3 or 4 months go by. We're getting no response from the school board on why they're going to do this to the FCA. All of a sudden, Mr. White goes up to Mr. Freshwater's room and finds stuff in his room. Christian literature, Bible on the desk, 10 Commandments on the wall. Heaven forbid we have 10 Commandments in the school. So at that point is when all that flared up. After the controversy of maybe ruffling some feathers in that school board meeting about please don't destroy our FCA, these kids love this. When you've got about roughly average 60 kids per lunch group, 3 lunch groups every Tuesday, there was a deep hatred to remove that from the school. All that flared from going in and ruffling a few feathers, then it all came from John Freshwater, where that was supposedly handled 6 or 8 months ago or longer than that. That was all put to rest. But all of a sudden it flared back up. There is liberal agenda in the schools. It's in our government. It's in our schools.
I haven't seen the monetary connection. That you haven't made a monetary connection.
You haven't seen it? Sir. Okay, let me go a little far. I can go a little farther with it if you want.
No, I mean,
yes.
What liberal things are costing our schools money?
Well, for one, they made the accusations of John about the homosexual agenda. If you remember correctly, we sit in the big school board meeting that night when we had to move from the library over to the theater. We have 600 people. I just watched the video the other night. 600 people attend that meeting, and after 24 or 26, don't quote me on the numbers, 24 or 26 people spoke in favor of John Freshwater. Only 3 spoke against John. Professor Hoppy from Gambier, Kenyon College, far left liberal. There was one other guy, and I'll have to look back in the room.
I spoke.
Okay.
Not far left liberal.
Well, I don't remember what everybody said that night, but I know.
And also,
let me finish. And Reverend Keith Stewart spoke that night.
Okay.
Out of 600 people that spoke that night, go back and watch the video. When John Freshwater spoke that night, it was almost unanimous standing ovation in that room of 600 people. When Keith Stewart spoke, there was 20 people in the corner down front that spoke, that clapped as Keith Stewart come off the podium. There is other ties. I don't have time to go in tonight. If you want to sit down sometime with me, and we'll go into some more of the things. We ain't got time here tonight to go into all of it. I will sit down with you. Lunch, anytime. I'll buy you lunch, and we'll sit down and discuss it. Just give me a ring. I'm at the car. But there's a lot more. We don't have time tonight to go through all of it.
You have shown no monetary consequences for what you said to the liberal judge.
The school did not sue John Freshwater.
No.
The school sued the school.
I'd just like to point out that FCA meets over the lunch hour, and that was the controversy. If it meets before school or after school, and not during school hours, it would have not been a controversy, but
It went on for 17 years.
Excuse me, but parents expressed
Could you
concern.
stand up and speak? You can hardly hear you.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify that FCA meets during the lunch hour, and that was the concern that parents contacted the school district and said our students are captive audience because they're already at school. And if they want to meet before school or after school, that's not on school time. But because it was during school time, we asked for permission slips for field trips and other things that they participate in, so they felt that it was only fair to do that for SCA. So, just to help you understand that.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Cline,
Yes.
Mayor Rolladot, by the way. I have a concern as a retired, proud teacher of our public school system here, and a Catholic, who sent my son to a Catholic school till 8th grade, and then I was privileged to have him in the Mount Vernon City Schools. Am I to understand then that you would rather not have a public education for children, that you would rather have a Christian-taught education to children? Because that's the impression I'm getting from your speaking, is that you're equating a liberal agenda with an anti-Christian, and you would prefer that our public education system actually be destroyed and have it as a Christian-centered education. That's the impression I'm receiving. Sir, please correct me if I'm
You
wrong.
probably wouldn't have that understanding if you would have walked in just 15 minutes ago. There's a lot of that, some of that was addressed in the beginning with the separation of church and state and the Constitution and David Barton's original intent. Go to wallbuilders.com. We've already discussed some of this tonight, but you walked in a few minutes ago.
Yes,
And
I
that's
had
fine.
a previous engagement. But I'm still saying that even though you probably discussed it earlier, it still is, to me, you are wanting to not separate church and state. That you
Separation,
want-
we've already discussed that. Separation of church and state is a lie. It's been flipped around backwards over
But
the
it's
last-
the law.
It's not in the Constitution. It's not in the Constitution.
That's something we need to deal with in the United States to straighten
Well,
out the truth on that.
okay, but right now,
I'm not-
we have a public educational system,
We have a
public
government.
school.
Yeah, we have a government, not public.
And according to our founding brothers, there were a lot of dissenting people who felt that slavery should be kept. No, it should not. So we are progressing, as I hope, as a society. And if we continue to say that Christianity, I am a Christian, at least I believe that my faith is Christian faith. If we continue to say that Christianity should be the basis of public education, that it's no longer a public education.
Can I ask you a question here?
No. She's
So-
asking him a question.
And if you would tell me again, do you wish public education to be gone and replaced with a Christian religious education? Because that's the impression I'm
No,
receiving.
first of all, I wish for public education, for what I call government education. Our government's running schools, not public. Our public people in the city of Mount Vernon don't have much say in what goes on in school. That's the first part, to answer your question. We're not public schools, we're government. And in the original intent, if you check into David Barton, as a school teacher, you would probably love the knowledge that's there with wallbuilders.com. Check it out, the original intent of how the school started. The Bible, and we've talked about this earlier, so I'm repeating it, but the Bible was one of the main books in the schools. Our founding fathers were all for it. The separation of church and state in the popular Constitution is taken way out of context today. It's been flipped around over the years by progressive of everything that's going on.
So, sir, I'm to understand then that as a conservative, to conserve means to stay safe. So you wish public education to be the same as it was at the beginning of our United States of America, but we are way beyond that now, sir. So what would you say, what is our choice now in public education? Do we teach Christianity in science class? So if we're going to teach Christianity, then we need to be teaching Islam. We need to be teaching
In America
Jewish-
today, they are starting the 5 pillars of Islam in our government-run schools today.
Do you agree with that in the Catholic college then, that they should allow Islam? to be taught
A Catholic school is not a public school.
Yeah, well, but
A Catholic school is not a public school.
But she's asking the question though, I mean, you're gonna teach everything everywhere, so you got Muslims going to a Catholic college that are disagreeing with the fact that they don't have anywhere to go.
No, I
So
said
we're gonna allow that?
Public.
Is that the next thing in the agenda?
Public education.
Notre Dame's close to a public school as it is, a public university.
And that's a higher education learning. We're talking about our babies here, where we have the opportunity to let them grow and expand their mind. So if we narrow our religious belief into the classroom, then we are narrowing the possibilities of our children to grow in the world. We are a world now, not just a microcosm of the United States of America. I won't take up any more time. I'm sure some more people have some questions, so thank you.
Are any of the rest of us able to answer this question?
John, how long are we going?
We have to be out of here at 9 o'clock.
We've got to hear 9 o'clock, we'll go for another 15 minutes. And let me say something here. We're not here to decide whether church and state's right, wrong, or indifferent. We're here to talk about these people running for school board. So
You
let's
brought up the question at the beginning. So
hey,
you brought it up. You said it was not in the Constitution and it was wrong. You implied it was wrong. You raised the subject.
I told you what the founding fathers said in their personal papers and left it there. I didn't say it was wrong. Okay.
Thomas Jefferson was the one who said that there should be a separation between church and state. He was one of the founding fathers, wasn't he?
You need to get educated, sir, because
Thomas
he did not.
Jefferson also had 20.
Why wasn't that Thomas Jefferson had church in the House of Representatives for almost 30 years? Okay?
That's what I suggest. Here's what I suggest.
Okay, let's get back to the school board issue here, okay?
I have a question about operations real quick.
She's got one here. She hasn't asked one yet. Let her go.
The current treasurer, it is my understanding, used a law firm to go after what they felt were residents not paying their fair share. As future board members, do you agree with her going after them, or would you request that maybe she stop using that procedure? Do you know?
I don't know enough about this to adequately answer your question. What is it? I mean, if someone is delinquent in their taxes.
No. What she did.
about union leaders.
No, what I'm saying is, she used a law firm to go through people's taxes, property taxes, to try to figure out if they were paying their fair share, meaning what the value.
Your assessment was not.
Right, their assessment was not correct, and so they wanted them to up it so that they could get more of it. But it's my understanding that this was a choice that she made. The board did not direct her on that.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
The treasurer recommended, she came from a district and was very knowledgeable, and she felt like it was only fair if someone buys a property that is undervalued, and so they pay $40,000 for it. As soon as they purchase it, it's evaluated at $400,000, at 10 times more than that. It seems only fair that that person would pay their fair share, because since we're collecting a dollar amount, that dollar amount is divided among all the taxpayers. So if someone isn't paying their fair share, that means someone else is paying more than their fair share. So she advised us to follow these, and the amount of money that it cost us, we brought in twice that in taxes. We also are over $800, I think it's $822,000 delinquent taxes. If we just could collect that, that would certainly help the Mount Vernon City School District.
Didn't they also go after that home purchaser for the difference in the delinquency of the tax retroactively from the years past?
We don't do that. That would be the auditor's office.
Yeah, they did do that. I think that was the problem.
I believe in the principle of equal protection under the law, and for certain individuals to be singled out for a reassessment while the whole county is not being reassessed, I don't believe that's equal protection under the law. Second, the assessment process is independent of the price that you paid for your house, or even the appraisal that you got before you bought the house. The assessor comes up with a value independent of what you mortgaged it at. So the fact that somebody got a bargain, maybe they bought a foreclosed house, whatever the circumstances were, that they paid less than somebody thought it was worth, that should not have weighed into the assessor's valuation. So I don't think we have any business reassessing properties outside of the normal periodic process that applies to everybody.
Everybody's talking about funding and how we get money in, how we collect the money. That's what part of the conversation's been. And in reality, part of reality, it doesn't matter where the money comes from, whether you do it from property tax, whether you do it from sales tax, whether you do it from some other way, okay? Unless the schools are operationally changed in what they do, they're going to continue to waste money and foolishly spend money. So as people wanting to be on the school board, what operationally are you going to do to fix the problems in the schools of the money that's some of being wasted in the first place anyway? Because unless you operationally change how the schools are run, really doesn't matter where the money comes from, because it's still going to get thrown, it's still going to get just wasted away anyway. And you're still going to just be asking the same question. If you go to a consumption sales tax, you're just going to, you go to 4.5% sales tax, as I know it can be done, you're just going to come back a few years later and want it to go to 9% because you just haven't fixed the problem. You just changed how you pull the money in to maybe appease a few people for a little while, but you haven't operationally changed anything in what's being done in the school itself to do anything about saving money. So what are you going to do about it?
Well, I face this question all the time in my work with the Salvation Army. I go visit the local chapters all over the state of Ohio and northern Kentucky, and none of them have all the money that they want to do everything that they want to do in the community. Most of them are facing deficits when they write their budget, and they come to me and say, how do I balance this thing? So I always ask the question, what is the core mission of the organization? What is it that you have to do in order to keep being the Salvation Army? Now, there's other things you would like to do if you had the money, but what's the core? What's the most important that you absolutely have to do? Well, in the case of the schools, the core mission is educating our children. So we need to go over the budget line by line and look at all of the expenditures with that in mind. Is this expenditure necessary to meet the core mission of educating our children? If you've got sideline expenditures which do not directly address the need to educate our children, then those are optional and might be targets for cuts.
Does that include getting rid of overpaid deadbeat teachers?
I think that all pay should be merit-based. I think people should be evaluated on a regular basis, whether they retain their jobs or not. In my organization, I have to do an annual review of all my employees and make a recommendation of whether we keep them or not. Now, there are employment laws that we have to follow. You can't just surprise somebody with an evaluation and the next day say you're gone. But if you can document that there are problems, if you can document that somebody is substandard, then yes, we need to replace them with somebody who is going to do a good job.
Anybody else want to address that?
Operation, what are you going to do to change it? I know it's a question for all five of you.
I said at the beginning that we are operating this year at $1 million less than we operated 5 years ago. And that's with a 7% increase in our water. Our utility costs have gone up. Gasoline has gone up. With all of the increases, the fact that we can operate $1 million less than we did 5 years ago, I think shows that we have financial constraints in place and that we've carefully monitored the budget. And I don't know what you're talking about when you say wasting money. I'm sorry, I don't know.
Well, but you're at, you come across, you ask for more,
We
this
aren't
is,
asking for
this is,
more money.
I
That's
understand this, I
misconception.
hear no, but you have asked for more money in the past. So operationally, where the money comes from doesn't matter. Where, the question isn't where the money's come from. What are you going to do about to fix the schools and how they're operated in order to cut more money out of there so that so that the money just doesn't keep to be added. Just Mr. Kelly answered that question very well. Operationally, there's going to be some changes and everything's going to be evaluated. What are you going to do about it?
We already evaluate teachers. We have an evaluation system in place. Teachers are evaluated on a regular schedule as well as administrators. So that's not a new system. We already have that. The state is also going to implement a system whereby we have to evaluate and include student growth as part of that measure. So that's a bill that's pending right now. So there will be some changes in evaluation that will be led by the state. But we're already evaluating teachers, and they take that very seriously.
What about the other members of the board here that?
I think to establish accountability is just the most important thing, and that would be reviewing all of the financial aspects and where that money goes and what does it affect. And I think that it should be evaluated thoroughly.
What are you all willing to cut to save money? I mean, I just came from Fredericktown. You want to compare other school districts, Mr. Bennett, so we'll do that. I just came from Fredericktown. I saw a sign that said that the average teacher up there makes $45,000 a year, $49,000 a year. The average resident in Fredericktown makes $35,000. Are you going to do cuts like that to save money and fix things?
Am I going to cut teachers' salary? Just cut it? No.
Why should a teacher drive an Escalade to work when I own a business and pay taxes and only drive a '96 Grand Cherokee? Why should they be able to I mean, you go to the career center, they got better cars than the people paying for it that go there.
I think, if I may, as a retired public school teacher, I started at a salary of $6,000.
That's good.
And I went to college 4 years. I received a master's degree, which cost money. I also went and took more classes beyond my master's degree. If you want high-quality people to teach your children in the public school system, then you have to be willing to pay for those people. These are wonderful, high-quality teachers. We are willing to pay our senators and our representatives a salary that they decide on their own. We are just simple public servants. Do we get a good education? I hope so. I wish that my son had gone to college so that he could have had a better income. But he decided not to do that. We decide to be public servants. We don't go into it for an exorbitant salary. We go into it to serve the public. The people up here at this panel will be serving the public for our public education. If you wish to evaluate teachers based on children's and our babies' test results, then we are going to end up being a society with less educated children. Please, stop maligning public teachers, that we are to blame for all of the problems of society.
I've got about 6 hands up here. There's a lady in the back that hasn't spoken before in the red top.
I grew up, my school in Danville, don't yell at me. My daughter, however, went to Mount Vernon. And there's some teachers in this room that my daughter had. And she got a very good education in Mount Vernon. However, she did have some teachers that weren't the nicest either. But I did have, and my daughter did have, a good set of teachers. Now, what these teachers get paid, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, something's got to change. Because these kids are all we have.
I'd like to respond to that, please. I'm going to share with you some private information my daughter has given me permission to share. My 16-year-old daughter was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. It is connected to autism, but people with Asperger's tend to be very intelligent, high-performing, and able to perform academically at a very high level. Where it manifests itself is an inability to make inferences, to read between the lines, to understand reading people's faces. They don't connect things. My daughter had, last year, all but one of her teachers were excellent, were wonderful, inspired her, and I couldn't be more proud of those teachers. But there was one that was not. This teacher was teaching in a manner which my daughter was not able to get it. She needed a concrete style, lay things out step by step. That's how Asperger's kids are. And the teacher was teaching in a very nebulous manner, and she just wasn't getting it. We raised an issue in November with the teacher. Didn't get anywhere. We raised the teacher late November with the guidance counselor. He promised us a meeting. That meeting didn't take place. We kept asking. We got to March. Nothing happened. Finally, in April and May, we started working our way through the administration of the school district because we weren't getting anywhere and she was falling behind in this class. We got shuffled from one administrator to another, and finally, towards the end of May, I think it was the third week of May, we got a meeting where all of her teachers were in the same room and 3 people from the administrative staff. And one by one, the teachers all said, Bethany's a wonderful student, she participates, she's great. And then the one teacher said, oh, she's completely checked out mentally. And if you'll excuse me, I have another meeting and I have to go. The conclusion of that meeting was, we'll put a note in her file for next year.
Yeah, I've had that.
Okay? We were heartbroken. We felt that the system had failed my daughter. We felt that the system was more interested in protecting that teacher than looking out for the best interests of our child. And as a school board member, I will not let that happen if I hear it happen to somebody else's kid.
I'll tell you, that's been going on for 10, 15 years. I got a granddaughter that was drummed out of this school because she had cerebral palsy. And I want to tell you, they made her. That's what's going on here. And these school board members do nothing.
Donna, you lady back here.
This woman right here, Mrs. Canada, she is one of the best teachers my daughter ever had. And Mrs. Dye over here was also one of my daughter's teachers. And she was a very good teacher. She had her in elementary school. She had her in middle school, right? Not high school. Yeah, middle school. These are 2 wonderful teachers, and I'm very proud that my daughter had them. And that's why this board needs to get together and get people on it that knows what they're doing, and not just mamby-pamby to make people happy. We need some changes to get these kids where they need to go, because they're the ones that are going to be taking care of us later.
I'll add this real quick. I have said, I think there's a lot of good teachers in these schools. I really do believe that. I'm not out. Honestly, I don't think I've ever bashed a teacher in this school system. I've coached these kids for 25 years, and I announced this earlier. I've coached these kids in 7th grade football, middle school football, high school baseball, little league baseball. I think there's a lot of good teachers in the schools. The problem is today, with the government-run schools, because these little kids in here that you refer to as your babies are our babies too. not just your babies. I got grandkids in this school. I got a little girl over there, 8 years old, in Pleasant Street right now, in 3rd grade. And I'm very into, and what I want to say, conversation with her teacher. Mrs., I can't think of her name. Anyways, I picked my granddaughter up there 2-3 days a week. I had the conversation with her on the playground with her. Very nice teacher. I think she's wonderful. My granddaughter loves her. We have some great conversations about my granddaughter's behavior, how I expect her to behave. If she doesn't, tell Grandpa. I'll take care of my granddaughter. But there are things going on to where I think if we get the government out of the way, because the government stifles, has the hands around the throats of teachers where they can't really express themselves sometimes. Because it's all about the unions, about the government. When I grew up as a kid, I think that the teaching industry is much different than it was 30, 40 years ago. Much different is what I can remember of coming up through school. I think we need to get back to the public, having more involvement, and not the division of everybody in this community, which we're at, and we're at that in America. There's the division. And America's split 50-50 right down the middle. Everybody wants to bicker and argue, and nothing gets accomplished. This town is watch, I gotta hurry. But we all need to come together and do what's best for all of our babies in these schools.
I want to say wait a minute. I want to say one thing. I've got a granddaughter who's got cerebral palsy. She's in a wheelchair. From middle school up through high school, we had meetings like you did. Nothing was ever done. And they didn't want to deal with it. She had a disease and she was dealing with it and wanted to go to school. She got to where she didn't want to go to school because of what she was getting from these teachers. And in high school, they carried on with the principal in high school. Finally, she had to go to home schooling. They drummed her out of school because of what she had. They didn't want to deal with it. This is the kind of school system we got here. And it goes from the Board of Education right on down with that, whatever you want to call him, ahead of the schools. Because he'll sit in his office and don't want to talk to anybody.
Okay, with that, we definitely have to cut it off, okay? We're running out of time. We have a drawing for... We don't have anybody there? Okay, well, I guess we'll just wait until next time.
I'd like to thank all the people that came up to answer the questions. This is a kind of a grueling thing when you're taking these kind of questions from the audience.
Thank you. If you have any other questions, I guess take it out to the parking lot.